Now we're talking about soft tissue health and preparing the elbow and the shoulder for good loads. One of the easiest ways to improve the health of the elbow is actually, believe it or not, some classical bodybuilding. One of the things that happens is when we see people warm up, they're not doing a good job of prepping the tissues by engorging them with blood. What's happening is that maybe we do some long toss, maybe we start to pick up our speed a little bit, but the tissues haven't really had a chance to be fully perfused, just engorged with blood. And an easy way to do that without fatiguing yourself too much is to take a simple rubber band and just hook it onto a fence and do some good old-fashioned press downs. So if you're doing all these prep shoulder pieces, that's great too, but just go ahead and add some good old-fashioned prep with some press downs. And what's the magic number? We like to say some for a few. But if your kids ask you, 100 is enough. You can take that into multiple positions, but mainly we're not trying to fatigue the triceps with a lot of loading. We're just trying to make it move and feel engorged with blood. So this is oftentimes best done before an athlete starts to throw, or as soon as we're done throwing for the day, get over there and start to get those elbows engorged with all the tissues and nutrients and hydration required for healthy elbows for the next practice. Then we come into sort of thinking about, well, how do I get myself turned around and ready for this, the rigors of sport? Well, one of the things that we've had excellent success with across all the levels of elite baseball is something called a little Voodoo Floss. And what we're going to do here is that this is a Voodoo Floss band, and all we're going to do is hook it up a few inches below the elbow. I get a wrap here, and what I try to do is wrap this at tensions of about 50%. So maximal tension in the band, 50% tension in the band. And then I just try to overlap over the elbow and the tissues of the forearm and upper arm, just about 50% or so. And I just work this around, a couple inches below the elbow, a couple inches below the elbow. You can have a friend wrap you, or you can do it yourself. And then what we're going to do here is just tuck this in, and you can see I've wrapped a little bit lower, but that's okay, it doesn't really matter. And what we're going to do here is I've got sort of a window of opportunity, because after a couple minutes it doesn't feel very good. Whoop, one more time. Wrap this in. I'm just tucking in the edge underneath the band here. And then what I'm going to do is just restore how my elbow works. So what we think is happening is that we're getting some temporary compression, high-level compression, which is making the vasculature work very hard to push blood back into the system. When we take this off, we're going to get a big rebound effect in blood and hydration. It's going to come crashing back into tissues that may be a little ischemic or maybe just a little bit worked, right? So one of the things that happens is I've got this little window of opportunity to get some movement in. And the other thing that I can do is, I'm fiddling with it, is that I can easily restore the rotation by grabbing the elbow and trying to rotate the forearm in the other direction. So what I'm doing here is I'm trapping the entire fascial sheath of the elbow and the forearm into a single mass, and then I'm trying to turn the tissue system, bony system underneath it. So grab and rotate. I can work on bending and flexing the elbow. I can do the same rotation up top using my other hand. So if we just tack and restore and floss back and forth and just get some movement in here, not only are we going to see better and more healthy tissues that slide, but also when I pop this off, blood is going to come crashing back in. And you'll see that it's going to turn bright pink here. The other magic about this is that potentially if I have a congested arm, one of the things that will happen is that this temporary occlusion or temporary high-level compression will help shuttle out the congestion that may be limiting or restoring my function and my ability to heal from last time I threw. And this can be safely done up to 5 to 10 times a day. Compress, move around a little bit, take it off, let the tissues fully rebound, compress, take it off. So something we can do easily and scale. So the last technique that we love, that we're huge fans of, is obviously the use of the Mark Pro. And what we find is that the earlier we can get athletes into healing, into recovering from the stimulus. Remember, what we're thinking about is throwing a ball very hard is a great way to challenge my tissues, right? That's the stimulus. And what I'm really trying to do is not just always think, hey, I'm throwing and I become weaker. What I want to happen is I'm an anti-fragile system. I want my body to have a positive reaction to what I did, which means if I cannot have an adaptation error, if I can hurry up and get the garbage out and bring the groceries back in, that means that I might be able to actually become stronger and more effective than when I started throwing. So here I did. The magic on the Mark Pro here is to put it on some low frequency and then get a gigantic flush. And I've set it up here just bis and tris and in the forearm to really bias towards the inside of the arm. Remember that if you have movement anywhere in the system, the lymphatics all drain to the heart. So we like to have a set of pads below what I'm trying to improve and potentially above the joint I'm trying to improve so that I can get contraction in those systems. One is pulling, one is pushing. So what's nice about the Mark Pro is that I can be recovering passively. I can sit around, I can be in the car on the ride home, and I can already be about decongesting the arm. One of the problems with sort of traditional heavy arm loading, like throwing, is that we throw really well, we get warmed up, and then it's difficult to decongest afterwards. It's difficult to get enough non-exercise activity because the elbows and the wrists are ostensibly at the end of a gravity well, and that my shoulders aren't moving the way I would if I was walking around or going for a recovery spin. So anytime I can get some movement in the vasculature, movement in the lymphatics to decongest an area after exercise, I can reset the clock to zero so that instead of waiting for 2 or 3 days for my body to go through, I can facilitate its natural ability to adapt to the stress, which is in this case, winning games. So how do we think about this? Well, let's keep an eye on your movement patterning. That's important. A couple minutes on some of these positions. Let's get the elbows full of blood. That's a really useful technique and tool. Third, how do we manage congestion? How do we push out the garbage? And then how do we decongest the system so we can throw again tomorrow? Some good ideas to help your young throwers and thrive in this season.